What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on Monday, October 27th, 2025, as Oregon defeats Wisconsin 21-7 to move to 7-1 on the year. The Ducks now enter a bye week for the second time this season before traveling to Iowa to take on the Hawkeyes in what is quickly becoming a highly anticipated matchup between two Big Ten programs. So we're going to be breaking down Oregon's latest win and talking all the latest in the great world of college football. But before we get to that, this episode is brought to you by the Derman Law Firm PC. Attorney Jacob Y. Derman is a car accident lawyer who fights against the insurance companies for injured Oregonians. If you've been in a motor vehicle accident, call or text Jacob directly at 541-241-6470. That's 541-241-6470. Jacob was born in Medford, raised in Bend, went to college here in Eugene, and now takes cases across every county in Oregon. And he's a diehard Ducks fan. He hasn't missed a single game in person, home or away, every season. I'm joined on today's episode by ScoopDuck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. J-Hop, how are you?
Good, man. Monday. I'm dry, and so that's a start to the week. And it's kind of weird. Here in Southern Oregon, it's not today particularly, but we're supposed to get some sun to finish out this week. I mean, it'll only be like upper 60s, but I mean, still, here we are almost November and still having some pretty crazy weather. But and then, of course, I don't have to cover a coaching search, so that also makes life easier as well.
That definitely makes life easier for both you and me. And there's been a lot of news, especially coming out of this weekend. And we're going to get to some of that later on here in the podcast, maybe talk a little bit of recruiting as well. But for you guys that wanted to talk Ducks and talk about Oregon's latest win, we wanted to hop into that one here first, Justin. So I know you were out there at the game on Saturday. I was watching this one, covering it from home, and it looked like it was raining a lot. We know that our scooped up predictions had to quickly get readjusted after we saw the Oregon offense sputtering and for much of that first half. So what were your kind of initial takeaways and impressions from this game? I know we've been writing a lot about it over on Scoop Duck.
Yeah, I mean, weird game, just a weird feel. I know folks that maybe we're not trying, but we're watching the game, on TV, probably couldn't get the real feel for the game. And yes, there were moments where it didn't rain, it would kind of break up, but it had rained throughout the day. That field doesn't dry up in 20 minutes, right? It doesn't stop raining and the field's dry. That field was soggy whether it was raining or not during the telecast. Now, there was quite a stretch there, almost the entire second quarter. I think a good portion of the first quarter, at least later in the first quarter, where the rain picked back up and never let off. So I do want to stress that was an impact on the game, and I'm not making excuses, but that's not really an excuse. Any football coach will tell you, yeah, that certainly impacted the game. Now, that said, I was there with some friends and watching the game, and I recognized that, it was a Grateful Dead tribute. And I know they'd put a lot of energy into that, not only the uniforms, but the production, before the game. The music that they played in the first half was not always Grateful Dead, but just kind of that genre or that era. It was different than normal. I mean, they played Coming Home at the end of the first quarter like usual. There was some usual parts. Just being there and experiencing the game and some of the differences in the music and just the flow that wasn't in control by Dan Lanning is a weird game. Like it just had a weird vibe where it was kind of gray. I think the crowd did a pretty good job of being into the game, even when it was raining. So I think the atmosphere was fine itself. Like I said, just every time the music would come on, and the players hear that. You're not going to tell me they don't. They do, feel that and kind of feed off that. It was a weird vibe. Like I said, I don't know. It's kind of a tough way to put your finger on it. It is October, and everybody talks about the weirdness that happens in October, and it certainly feels like that was the case. It was one of those games where you just kind of really, at the end of the day, say, all right, Oregon won the game. It wasn't pretty. There's a lot to clean up. There's a lot to fix. It definitely raises some concerns heading to Iowa next week. But you do at one level just say, hey, won the game, get back to the locker room, dry off, and kind of get ready for the next one.
And Dan Lanning was I don't know if I'd say adamant, but he did say multiple times in his post game presser, "Hey, Oregon played the brand of football that they needed to win. I'm sure they wanted to put up a lot more points. They wanted more explosive passing plays, but that's just not the kind of game that this ended up being for Oregon. Oregon ended up having 335 total yards of offense compared to Wisconsin's 196, 9 penalties for a total of 75 yards. We know that that's kind of been an on and off problem for Oregon so far this year, and thought that it looked like they cleaned it up a little bit, and then now we're back here, and penalties showing up at home is never really a good sign, because that's when the offense is at their best and they have the crowd quieted down to help them. So it was just a really bizarre game, and Oregon ended up, committing to the run. They ran it 45 times on the day for 203 total yards, 203 total yards, and they did what they had to do. But God, it was just so strange. Like that, we were predicting just massive blowouts, Justin, and then Oregon finally broke through and got into the end zone right before halftime. So the defense did what we kind of expected them to do, and here we are again. The first time it wasn't in a rainy game, and here we are in a rainy game where we're looking at the offense saying, "Hey, like, what's going on here? You guys aren't really carrying your end of the bargain compared to the defense." I feel like that's been kind of, and like you wrote about that tale of two halves. Reading that one today was really a good one. So that was kind of what stood out to me. Is just here we are again. Oregon's kind of just not getting what they need from the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I recall well into the second quarter looking, to my right at the newer jumbotron, and which puts some of the quick stats up there. And Oregon's rush yards had a negative, a minus sign, a negative sign in front of it for pretty much the entire first quarter, and I think almost all of the second quarter up until that last drive where they scored. That's not good. I- you know, I do think the offensive line was to blame. I didn't particularly like the play calling from Will Stein, and I know, I mean, he's a great play caller. It seemed disjointed, and I don't know. It was just a weird. Dante Moore felt like he was off. I mean, it was just weird because obviously you get the offside kick. The onside kick immediately right out of the gate. And it's like, okay, the crowd's in it. Here we go. We're going to, it's going to be 14-0 before we even blink. And it wasn't. It just never happened. And I do understand the wet elements. I do understand how that takes out some of the deep pass game. It wasn't just wet. It was windy too. You could look out and you could just see the rain, just kind of doing this kind of stuff. So, I mean, I do want to sit here and say, I understand what was going on out there, but it's just crazy to me. Again, a tale of two halves, the way Oregon ran the ball in the first half and the way they were able to run the ball in the second half. I mean, to me, that's a game where you probably, frankly, couldn't have ran the ball enough, just stick to it. And it probably was going to break free. And so, was Oregon trying to get too cute with some of these things, thinking, oh, they're going to expect us to run the ball, we'll pass, obviously not finding success doing that. I don't know. It felt like an off game for Dante Moore. It felt like an off game for the offensive line. It felt like an off game for a good bulk of the crowd. And again, yeah, they went in at halftime and came out and basically dominated a much lesser opponent. By no means are we going to call that a quality win or a clean win or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, you take the win, but I also made some points on there that I recall an Ohio State team last year that lost to Michigan late in the year, and Michigan completed 9 passes in that game for about 60 yards. And then Ohio State went on to win the national championship about a month and a half later. So these games happen. Like, they happen. We shouldn't sit here and say, okay, throw away the playoffs. Oregon's not making the playoffs. I mean, chew on it. Look at some things that maybe need to get cleaned up or fixed. Process it and move on. That's the way I'm looking at it.
And Dante Moore finished the day 9 for 15 with 86 yards, and he was sacked twice. But he also got banged up, which I thought was one of the biggest stories from the game. Um, it's kind of hard to describe the hit. Like, it looked like he almost took like an arm bar to the face, and he got up, and you could see just gushing blood from his nose in that game. And then so that was early second half, and then he wouldn't return to action, Justin, and Duck fans saw Brock Thomas, the local Eugene product, come in as Oregon's backup, and he went 4 for 4 for 46 yards and a touchdown, and he was also sacked twice. His lone touchdown pass came to Janoris Wilson, who logged his second big man touchdown of his career after getting one last year as well. And I mean, yeah, Dante definitely looked off again, but again, you have to kind of evaluate that with the elements also playing into it, which doesn't give him an excuse, but like that does impact performance, obviously, for a quarterback. And one thing I thought was kind of interesting, if we're just talking about quarterbacks here, is that Dan Lanning was asked in his post game presser again, kind of more or less like, hey, so Brock Thomas is the backup. Like, what are Luke Moga and Austin Novosad not doing? And he got a little testy with his response, saying like, hey, our guy was 4 for 4 and we won the game. Like, why? Almost, I'm paraphrasing here, but like saying like, why does this keep being a talking point? And our guy James Crepia at the Oregonian kind of jumped on the grenade and asked about it. And he was like, you don't have to tell me. And he's like, well, tell them, tell the fans. So what did you make of that whole kind of exchange? And looks like Brock Thomas has this job.
Yeah, I think Dan needs to understand, like, kind of take the temperature here. It's a quality question that somebody should ask. James, asked it, and I think people should applaud him for kind of having the cojones to ask, because a lot of the others in attendance don't. Like you said, he fell on the grenade. I think Dan needs to kind of read the. I know this is going to be a rare criticism. He needs to read the room a little bit better and understand that, hey, man, you've got, 3-4 stars that you've signed sitting behind this guy, and you're trotting out the walk on. Can you give us a little more as to just, he's the most prepared or whatever his response has been? Can you give us a little more as to why? And yeah, I understand he went 4 for 4. He should have had an interception that he got really lucky. It wasn't an interception. And, he wasn't asked to do a whole lot in the pass game. He didn't look bad. Like I thought Brock Thomas did well. I think one of the factors that fans are not really paying attention to, Brock Thomas grew up in Eugene, has played in wet weather plenty of times. And I think that was part of the decision. I think you look at that, and you ask any quarterback, you ask any head coach or any OC if playing in the rain, or at least rain like that, is different than a normal dry game. It 100% is. Like it. I mean, your grip on the ball, your ability to plant, all those things are much different. So I do think there's a level of experience for Brock Thomas there that added value in that game. Now, for me, okay, this was Wisconsin. Oregon probably could have won with me back there. And Brock Thomas is a better quarterback than me. Trust me, I promise. But you get my point. I think against a team like Wisconsin, you're Dan Lanning, you say, okay, Brock's probably got the most experience in the rain. Luke Moga grew up in Arizona, has probably never seen a drop on a ball, and I see why he would make that decision. Now, to me, I'm curious. Okay, if a similar situation happens against Iowa or USC or Washington, a much tougher opponent, is the same decision made? Do we then see Novosad or Moga or somebody else, or is it again Brock Thomas? Because I think that dynamic changes things if it's a non-rainy game and it's a much different opponent. I think another part of that factor is you look at Wisconsin and say, hey, we can beat them with Brock Thomas. We'll be okay, right? Let's go ahead and give it a shot. And I think, essentially that's what happened there. We also know that Dante Moore could have returned once again if they were maybe facing an opponent like I just mentioned, Iowa or USC or Washington.
And I really enjoyed watching the post game press conference with Brock, because he was just kind of beaming from ear to ear when people were asking him questions, and you couldn't see it; it was off camera. But Dante Moore kind of ducked into the media room and said, "I love you, Brock. You're doing your thing, man." And Brock was just super happy about that. And we heard about the team carrying him on their shoulders into the locker room. So I think we can kind of look at what he was able to do and be happy with that, um, and recognize that he's performing well, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like you said, like it is a very reasonable question to ask. So we'll continue to see how the quarterback situation is handled as far as a backup standpoint. But the just to kind of wrap up on offense, Jordan Davison had himself a hell of a day again. 16 carries for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. No, Whittington wasn't far off, 14 carries for 97 yards. Both of these guys were averaging north of 6 yards a carry, Justin, which is just, and that was only in one half of really running the ball effectively. So you just have to wonder what would those numbers have looked like if they were in a groove and doing what they were probably supposed to be doing and what people expected in that first half. But Jordan Davison earned On3 True Freshman of the Week honors, or all freshman, true freshman team from Charles Power. So that was a good development. And there wasn't really much to write home about as far as the passing game goes. So I think you just got to continue to complement the run game and seeing what Oregon's able to do. Jordan Davison has done everything he can to potentially assert himself as the starting running back, top running back on this team, especially with Jalen Lamar banged up and missing time.
Yeah, ultimately, I think there's a level here that the move to Brock Thomas, obviously attempted 4 passes, forced Will Stein to go back to the run game, which is probably something he should have done earlier. And then, of course, Oregon found success in the run game, kind of doing some different things. I don't think this was Will Stein's best game, and I am being critical. By no means am I saying Will Stein sucks at his job, any of those overreactions. I just don't think that this was at least his best, first half of football. I think it was a little bit, just a little too brave, trying to, pass the ball a little bit more in those elements in the first half. And then when they went to Brock Thomas, they're like, let's not test it too much. Let's stick with the run. And obviously that's when Oregon pulled away. So yeah, that's kind of my final thoughts. And again, I'll circle back on all those things. I think the offensive line that we saw in the first half versus the offensive line we saw in the second half, I don't know if Poncho went in there and ripped them all a new one or what at halftime, but they clearly came out with a little bit more fire in their belly in the second half and did a good job there. This is a good unit in run blocking, but their pass blocking leaves a lot left to be desired, right? I mean, it's just not great. It's not consistent. And so, that's another part of this offense is if you want it to go, you got to lean into the strengths. And I think the strengths of this offensive line is run blocking.
And I think too, like, I want to see more short passes to the tight ends. Like, if pass blocking isn't where it needs to be, or potentially if it doesn't get to where it needs to be, use those tight ends. Kenyon Sadiq didn't get a whole lot of work on Saturday. I'm trying to look at the final stats here. He got targeted twice and he caught 1 pass for 6 yards. So that was a little surprising to me. Jamari Johnson caught 1 pass for 23 yards, and then Rogers Heliapaga had that fake that he caught from James Ferguson Reynolds, but and it would have been a touchdown, I think, but unfortunately it got called back due to a penalty. So I think Oregon's got some really good tight ends, and that could be my offensive coordinator 101 resolution to maybe navigate the pass blocking issues and hurdles that the Ducks find themselves dealing with. We're going to hop over and talk about some Oregon defense right after this. Duck fans, are you going to an Oregon game this season? If you are, the Oakway Lifestyle Center at the corner of Oakway and Coburg is the destination for Duck fans. Whatever you're looking for, they've got it all. Get a bite to eat at Sun River Brewing or PF Chang's. Check out shops like Lululemon or Nordstrom Rack. Need a place to stay? Book your lodging at the Hyatt Place at Oakway Center and visit their rooftop bar. The Oakway Lifestyle Center is walking distance from Austin Stadium, has something for everybody, and is a great post-game place to celebrate another Duck victory. Max Torres and Justin Hopkins of ScoopDuck On3 back with you upon further review as we break down the Ducks' 21-7 win over the Wisconsin Badgers. If you like what you're listening to, we strongly urge you to check us out at ScoopDuck.com. $1 gets you a subscription going, and you get a complimentary year of access to The Athletic and access to insiders like Pete Nakos, Chris Lowe, Steve Wiltfong, Chad Simmons. The list goes on. The value has never been greater of an On3 Rivals subscription, especially with the coaching carousel and transfer portal heating up by the minute. But Justin, we get here to talk some more about the Oregon game against Wisconsin. The defensive performance was really solid. You saw 6 pass breakups from the Oregon defense, forced a pair of fumbles, Bryce Betcher and Theron Johnson. And Aaron Flowers continues to play really good football, and I don't think it should be overlooked that he was named a captain for this game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'll take a bunch of time here. I've been pretty steadfast. I think you have. Just defense isn't the issue with this team. And when I say issue, I mean the call for these close games. It's definitely not a defensive issue. It's certainly not a secondary issue. I know at times, teams might decide to pick on Ife Obadegu or Theron Johnson a little bit. Everybody's scared to death to throw at Brendan Finney, as they should be. Aaron Flowers and Jaden Kennedy have been 2 absolute diamond bright spots deep in the secondary. And again, it just reminds me that, all 5 players in the secondary are new starting players, and they're playing like a group that's been together for 2 or 3 years. So hats off to them. I know we're hoping for a little more sacks and some pressures from the defensive line. They do a really good job in the run game typically. Do a pretty admirable job of forcing most quarterbacks to move. I do think that what they do up front is a bit of a byproduct of how good the secondary is. There's not many times that a quarterback's able to just drop back and sit there and scan the field and wait, for a receiver to get open. So both those things are kind of a yin and yang. Linebacker continues to be the weak link. I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. It's not the strong unit on defense. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. I think Bryce Betcher is one of the 2 players that's kind of the heart and soul of this defense. Makes a lot of really good tackles. Does have some misses here and there, but makes a lot of really good tackles. Thought Jerry Mixon had a pretty good game overall in this last game. Dylan Williams is coming along a little bit. Devin Jackson did have a play or 2, but obviously he does have some plays where he gets washed out and kind of looks a little bit lost. But again, we're talking about 2 players out of 11, typically as far as that group goes. And I mean, really, it's not an awful group. I think people are kind of just mob mentality with that. It's not a strength of this team, but again, if we're talking strength, that secondary is full of really good players. That defensive line's full of really good players. The linebackers are serviceable. Yeah, it's not, Harold Perkins and some of the elite guys of college football back there, but it's good enough for this defense to be the strength of this team overall, the defense versus the offense, and to be one of the top defenses in the country. So that's really all I have to say about the defense. I just, at times they do miss some tackles. It's not often, but every once in a while I kind of get some, where they're going for the ball, and I wish they would just wrap up and make the tackle, but there's really very little to complain about here.
The defense being the strength or the stronger side of the ball of this team, when you look at it kind of in a 50 or 30,000 foot view, it's kind of what we expected, I guess. It fits the mold since it's Dan Lanning's team and he's a defensive guy. But at the same time, I don't think that if you would have told me before the season that Oregon's offense loaded with as much talent as it has would be having some of the issues that it's been having, I wouldn't have expected that to be the case, especially along the offensive line with the job that Elite Terry's done the past couple of years at Oregon and the rest of the law firm. So, I mean, I know that they're working at it. They don't want to see this result, any more than the Duck fans want to see. But that's just kind of the reality of where things are at. The pass blocking and then I guess, linebacker play. Those are the 2, I don't even know if I'd say necessarily weaknesses of this team, but, needs for improvement in areas that they can kind of get exploited when other teams scheme them up. So I think that they're gonna be fine. I mean, they're still 7-1 and the number 6 team in the country, Justin, and everything they want is right in front of them. So I think it's important to keep perspective where we can be critical where it's merited, but also if you're a Duck fan, you got to be grateful for what you're seeing out there on the field every week, because maybe this is a good segue into some coaching carousel stuff. Oregon still has their head coach, and a lot of programs are running out of patience. A lot of admins and board of trustees and directors are firing their coaches, and we saw Brian Kelly get fired by LSU yesterday, which makes it the top open job in the market now.
Yeah, and I think to your point, wrapping up on, just kind of where Oregon's at, like you said, Oregon's 7-1, and the one loss that, like, if we just take a step back from the 7-1, who's probably the best looking teams right now in college football? Ohio State and Indiana are almost like 1 and 2 on every single list out there. Okay, you lost a close one to Indiana, right? So basically the number 2 team in the country. I know it was at home, but you were toe to toe with them, and you really didn't play a very good game overall. So that tells you where this team is at. They're not out of anything. And I think, to your point, broad picture, I think if the offense can play a more complementary style of football to the defense, that's what this team is missing. They don't necessarily need to go and score on every third play. They need to sustain some drives. They need to get points. A lot of times they don't get points, even if it's field goals. That complementary style of football will only make the defense better. And to your biggest point, Dan Lanning's going to be the coach the rest of the year. You don't have to worry about him getting poached by LSU or whoever. And this coaching cycle is wild. I know there was some recruits on campus, and you had some, replies from them already on ScoopDuck. Along with your coaching carousel segue, there's going to be a lot of movement in the transfer portal. And this is, I think, an opportunity for Oregon to just be ready and see what becomes available and take advantage.
And Oregon's in a great position to do just that because they have this class that isn't just loaded with numbers. They're at 18 verbal commitments now after the addition of four-star Colorado linebacker Braylon Hodge on Friday, which coincidentally was Blake Purchase's birthday. So 2 Cherry Creek guys for Oregon now. And they have this great sense of stability when other programs are looking for that. And even before, I got to start asking about it more now in my interviews, but like a lot of times I'll ask what stands out to you about Oregon, and I've gotten the stability as part of the answer, which is great. And now that Brian Kelly is out at LSU, not necessarily a bunch of guys in the 2026 class that come to mind for Oregon, aside from defensive lineman Deuce Geralds. I was, doing some searching this morning, and he had kind of talked about how he's a Baton Rouge native, and they have really strong ties to Frank Wilson, who's been in the interim following Kelly's firing. So would seem to indicate that there's not a lot of room to move for Geralds. He seems like he's kind of strong in his commitment, but you never know, and you never say never. And then the other name that, of course, comes to mind is DJ Pickett, the number 1 cornerback in the 2025 recruiting class that was down to a final group of LSU, Oregon, and Miami. Of course, he is a Florida native. So that's a loaded roster, Justin. And there could be guys that Oregon has ties to that they go after. There could be guys that Oregon has no ties to that they go after. And that's just kind of the beauty that comes with the transfer portal. And because of the way that they've navigated this recruiting class, they're in a great spot where they only have a couple of guys that they're still recruiting in 2026 that they're still going after. And that's going to give them some flexibility and some room to be aggressive with the guys that they think can be immediate contributors for them in 2026.
Yeah, Oregon's got the opportunity to be aggressive, like you said. I don't think they're going to take 15 guys in the transfer portal. I think they're going to have a prime opportunity, though, to take 6, 7, 8 guys, 6, 7. Anyway, 6, 7, 8 guys.
Knew it was coming.
Yeah, as soon as I said it, I'm like, oh my gosh, where's my daughter? Anyway, 6, 7, 8 guys that I think are the instant impact type guys. And when you combine that with the nucleus that's already in Eugene, right? Many of these guys are going to return. Obviously, you're going to have to replace more than likely a center. I mean, we know Poncho is probably going to the NFL. You're more likely going to have to replace a Kenyon Sadiq, unless you just assume Kendra Harrison can do that. You've only got a handful of pieces you really need to worry about. And if you can plug and play with proven guys. Now, again, let's not be lazy. Let's not be lazy like a lot of people on social media and say, okay, DJ Pickett, come on down, or Dallas Wilson, come on down. Is it possible? It's certainly possible. But, I mean, let's be realistic. More than likely, LSU is going to make the biggest hire of anybody in the country. As soon as whoever it is gets hired, that roster is going to be like, hey, cool, we're excited. We got a new coach. It's going to be like a new infusion. Not very many of their elite guys are going to leave, if any. So, I mean, we just need to kind of maybe like pump the brakes a little bit, but there will be opportunities. My point is there will be opportunities. And, let's just put it this way. Did anybody think Dylan Thieneman was going to end up at Oregon at any point in his career? No, but here we are, really good player on a team that, went through a change and he decided, hey, I'm going to look for the best opportunity for me for 1 year to up my NFL stock. And that's what Oregon has done a really good job with. And that's where they lean into. So, like I said, let's not just be lazy and say, oh, well, this guy had an offer from Oregon and visited and was committed at one time. He's naturally going to come over now because his coach left. That's not often going to be the case, but there's still going to be lots of opportunity for Oregon to be had in this transfer portal season. I think it's going to be a wild one.
Another name that comes to mind for me is going to be crazy, Justin, and you can kind of feel how crazy it's going to be because we're talking about it as much as we are now, and we're not even in November yet. And the early signing period is set to start, I believe, this year on December 3rd. So we're less than two months away. I mean, closer to a month and a half, really. And the month of November is the last full month of regular season games. So that's opportunities for guys to go on official visits, unofficial visits, for all of these last minute trips to come together. The other name that comes to mind for me, Justin, as far as portal and coaching carousel stuff, we haven't heard anything about it. He may not even end up transferring, but if he were to enter the portal, how about Penn State's Andrew Olesh? That was a guy that Oregon recruited very heavily in the 2025 cycle. He ended up flipping from Michigan, I think it was, to Penn State, but took an official visit out to Oregon, as did Lincoln Cure. Not that Kansas State has fired their head coach, but that's one that I think could definitely make a lot of sense, given that Oregon's going to be looking to replace Kenyon Sadiq, and I don't think Olesh would be a guy that helps you replace him. It kind of helps you transition. With I think Jamari Johnson will have more eligibility, and then Roger Taliapaga is probably someone that's going to be in shape for in line for a bigger role as well.
Yeah, and a team that runs a lot of 12 personnel, I think you're looking at like, hey, we'd like to have 4 tight ends we can lean into, that we can count on, which is frankly, kind of why I'm surprised Oregon hasn't ran more 12 personnel this year. They have at times, but I would think with the offensive line being a struggle that they would lean into that a little bit more. But all that aside, I think that, Andrew Olesh is a guy that could potentially make sense. Again, these big schools, Penn State, Florida, LSU, they're going to make quality hires. They're going to, Eli Drinkwitz maybe goes from Missouri to Florida. He's probably going to stop, the plug that he's probably going to stop anybody really from transferring. The key is there's no more spring portal window. So these guys now have to do it basically in December or don't. And that becomes a key to the equation, is how quickly some of these schools can make a hire. And a perfect example there is Lane Kiffin, right? Right now, he's got a playoff caliber team. If he's still playing in January, that's going to impact, LSU. Can they wait that long? So,
right.
Again, we're circling back to things that have been an issue for years now, ever since some of this stuff's come into play, is that the timing just doesn't line up very well for any of these schools, every school. So hopefully that's something that they can continue to iron out and fix, because, like we said off the top, Oregon's going to is fortunate that there's no Dan Lanning talk. I think I've seen his name like once or twice, and it's pretty much from fans who don't know any better. CBS on 3, they're not putting Dan Lanning's name next to any of these jobs. So from a standpoint there, all Oregon needs to do is just stay the course, go win games, keep Dan Lanning's name out your mouth when it comes to coaching searches, and, see who's available, because there's going to be some guys available.
My kind of parting thoughts here, Justin, just to wrap it up. Oregon's in a bye week for the second time this year, which presents an opportunity for the coaches to get on the road and do some recruiting, see some commits, see some targets. I mean, my biggest question going into this bye week is this going to help Oregon? Because it didn't seem like it helped them when they faced Indiana and they came out sluggish at home. So I was asking that question in our gamer thread, which is always popping over on ScoopDuck during game days. But I asked, I'm like, I can't help but be curious. Would Oregon be playing even worse right now if they were coming off a bye? Because they just have not played well when they have downtime and they have rest. So that's my big question. Maybe you're more confident because they're going on the road to Kinnick Stadium, which is known as one of the more hostile environments in the Big Ten. I don't know. It seems like a huge wild card. I want to give the staff the benefit of the doubt, but in that regard, as far as playing off of a bye or rest, I don't know that they've earned it so far this year.
Yeah, I don't love the bye. Whatever Dan Lanning's been doing, he needs to change, because clearly this team, decides with these buys or these layoffs that they can go into chill mode. And it's like, no, man, you gotta keep the hammer down. And I'm not saying you got to go out there and beat the crap out of each other in practice. That's not what I'm saying. But you do need to, keep some sort of a competitive regimen. And I will say this, if you just kind of look back and objectively, I'm not going to pull some stats out, but just look objectively, Oregon has played better on the road this year than they've played at home, which is really weird to say. I mean, if you look at the way Oregon started against Oregon State, kind of sluggish, right? If you look at the way Oregon played against Indiana, pretty sluggish. You look at the way Oregon played, obviously, this last weekend against Wisconsin, not that great. These are all home games. Oregon went out to Penn State and got after it pretty good, right? They got after it pretty early, looked pretty good. That was a good battle. Oregon went out to Rutgers. They beat the piss out of Rutgers from day one, from the first minute. You could even argue they did the same against Northwestern when they went back there in the Win Bowl. So for whatever reason, this team's played better on the road than at home this year. I don't know.
We're trying to figure the answers out. That's why we cover this team and talk to sources and everything. But the answer is not as easy as it might seem. But if you guys want to find more of Justin, you can follow him at jhopkinssd. If you want to find more of me, you can find me anywhere at mtorres sports. Subscribe to the ScoopDuck On 3 YouTube channel. And then while you're at it, subscribe to scoopduck.com, part of the On 3 Rivals Network. Super quick plug. We're going to have a pretty special guest I'm planning on for later on this week on Wednesday. So that's definitely an episode you guys won't want to miss. I was trying to do something special for the 700th episode, but life got crazy and the ball just kept rolling. So excited for that episode to come out. Make sure you guys tune into that one. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.